The world of work has changed forever. Part 3, a golden age of creativity. As a result of the empowerment we get from these amplifying technologies, as Chris Anderson calls them, there has been a liberating explosion of creativity. To a large extent, this is enabling more people to free themselves from the increasingly iron cage I discussed in Part 2. It's the age of empowerment. If you want to be empowered, you can be. You switch on the computer. You're going to need a guide to it all because there's a lot of websites out there, you can't read it all. The second point, which you may have missed if you just read the big or the old media, which is part, of course, of the corporatist problem in the first place, is actually at the moment is a golden age of creativity. You may not realise that. Just to give you 12 examples of creativity from a whole variety of situations. The first is the Japanese maglev train. Recently it aced its first test at 311 miles an hour. Can you believe that? 311 miles an hour. It's almost inconceivable. The second one is that all the world's knowledge is in your pocket, in the phone. I just couldn't conceive that when I was a child. I couldn't conceive that it was on a biggest IBM computer mainframe, let alone on something in my pocket, and it's all happened so fast. The other point, as Daniel Priestley makes, not just is all the world's knowledge in your pocket, but now potential connection to any other human being who has a similar device. That's just absolutely phenomenal. It's one of these things that hasn't sunk in. One of Priestley's points in passing is that technological changes can take 20 or 30 years to feed through into society. This third one I came across recently was this fascinating real-time 3D hologram viewable from all angles. When the children will say, "Oh, Daddy, when you were little, did you have black and white televisions?" and treat me rather like I was from the Stone Age, I get my own back by asking them what their grandchildren will be saying to them in 50 or 60 years' time. Well, no doubt long before then there will be real 3D displays on televisions. Another one which I saw was a high-resolution 3D scanner in your pocket which can clip onto your smartphone. This is absolutely phenomenal. You can just get a 3D picture of any room or any object. You could email it around the world and somebody can see the 3D situation for themselves. This fifth one is absolutely phenomenal, one of the best things I've seen. I want to read to you about it. It's called RoboHand. There is something called amniotic band syndrome, which affects 1 in 1,200 live births, whereby due to problem in the uterus, there's a loss of fingers. When Richard Van As, master carpenter in Johannesburg, South Africa, decided to make a set of mechanical fingers, it wasn't just for fun. He'd lost 4 of the fingers on his right hand in an unfortunate work accident. For a tradesman like Rich, having a disabled hand is a big professional detriment. So Rich decided on the day of his incident that he would use the tools available to him to remedy the situation. And there's a video on MakerBot's website about this. So he made for himself, using a 3D desktop printer, an artificial hand. After posting his own story, he received emails and Facebook messages from parents whose children were candidates for a robo-hand of their own. One of these children was 5-year-old Liam, pictured here, who had underdeveloped fingers and toes due to problems in the womb. So, in South Africa, a guy solves his problem of having chopped off his fingers. He prints the design of the hand for $150. Not only that, but he uploads the design, which is now being downloaded by 3,800 people around the globe. And in different parts of the world, kids like Liam have now got a hand. It's absolutely phenomenal. And a much better hand than comes from the big companies and the medical companies. And in particular, this guy here, Liam, his parents couldn't afford one of the real ones. Phenomenal. Impossible to follow that, but just a small one here. There's a super slow motion, portable, affordable video camera, which takes 18,000 frames a second. I was talking earlier about the disintermediation of big companies. Here is Lending Club in the States, where it's peer-to-peer lending. If you've got loads of money, you might want to lend it to poor people like me, or vice versa. And what we can see here is the exponential growth in loans up to 2 billion. The disintermediation of the big companies is proceeding apace. Another example here, closer to home, is I was talking to a friend of mine recently about the ongoing revolution, and he told me about his son, who used to work in a large bank. He got disenchanted, to quote Max Weber, he got disenchanted with working in the large bank. He left and went through difficulties of trying to get employment elsewhere and internships and all sorts of big company bad behaviour towards people, keep you coming back for interviews for months, don't reply, etc., etc. Then he and a friend last Christmas decided to set up their own men's toiletries business. My friend said actually that they got a perfumier and they made it smell of oily rag. I think maybe he was joking, which is why I didn't mention the name of the company. Anyway, they contacted the perfumier, they got the scent designed as they wished, And now it's manufactured in China. There were still only 2.5 of them in the company, and a year later it stocked in some of the leading stores in the UK, and they're working on distribution agreements elsewhere in the world. So they've got an example of 2.5 people who do something from nothing in a year for $1,000, or perhaps less. I was talking to another friend of mine this week about the entrepreneurial stuff, and she said, her cousin's nephew or cousin sister, something like that, was making wood and rope garden furniture, which was selling all over the country, including on the Prince of Wales estate. Another friend I had lunch with recently has just started, with some colleagues, first Islamic underwriting insurance company at Lloyd's of London. Again, I think there's something just like about 4 of them at the core of it. And Islamic insurance has never been done before. Islamic banking, Sharia-compliant banking, has been around for quite a long time. David Bocelli here, if there are any saints in the world, he's probably one of them. He's got these exercises he created for releasing tension and trauma. In particular, at the beginning, he was really focused on people who were in war zones. He'd been in Lebanon, he'd been in many other war zones himself. Just the experience of being in the war zone and shelled and bombed is very traumatizing. He got traumatized himself, had post-traumatic stress disorder, came back to America for a year to get over it, and applied himself to the problem that the fact is that millions of people around the world, sadly, are exposed to these kind of traumas, but they all can't afford a year's therapy. His discovery was that there are a simple set of exercises which essentially let the body physically release the trauma which is trapped inside. The physical release of the trauma then liberates the psychological issues. Furthermore, he went on to realize, as did the people who tried his exercises, that it's not just the trauma with a capital T, it's the trauma with a small t, or it's the tensions, if you like, with a small t, of everyday life that affect us all, and therefore these exercises are good for everyone. They take about 15 minutes a day. Once you've got into it, you have to do them about 2 or 3 times a week. And he's now taught them to 5 million people worldwide. There are some amazing stories there, from Royal Marines in Iraq to fire officers who saw 12 of their colleagues die in fires, and the widows and the families. Phenomenal. It really is an age of creativity. The last one I want to give you as an example, something called the IgG food test for health and energy. As they say, 3 out of 4 people that try this get results. One of the people to get results is Paula Radcliffe, a world marathon record holder. In particular, I've been recommending this to my friends and family for quite a long time after I discovered it myself, and now over a dozen people have achieved huge benefits with them. Taking a case of my elder daughter, she had eczema on her eyelids, which is a very unfortunate place to get it because you can't apply the strong steroid creams because of the eyes and because of the thin eyelids. And this would have been a huge problem down the conventional medical channels. However, she had the test and she cut out milk, orange juice and perhaps yeast. And within 2 weeks the eczema has gone from her eyelids and it hasn't returned. And now she occasionally drinks those foodstuffs. This is absolutely incredible. Again, as I say, it's an age of creativity. I think I should just make a point at this stage, which is that when I speak to people about these matters, their immediate reaction is, okay, that's all very well, but I don't have any ideas. I think there's a number of things I can say here. The first is that if you're stressed, overworked, and consume the old media every day, then you're probably not going to be in the creative frame of mind. But you were creative once as a child when you were playing in the garden or playing with water or playing with sand. And if you managed to relax from the office, then you will gain your creativity. The second is that these ideas don't have to be grand. People sometimes act as if they've got to think of a way to fly to Mars with feathers. I'm doing some coaching and mentoring with someone around this area recently. He's an architect in his 30s, and he's decided that in the future you either have to become an employer or an employee, which is his way of talking about this divide. I've taken him so far to 2 very interesting coffee shops. The point being that these 2 places are vibrant. Coffee shop is not a new idea in London. It's been around for centuries, but you just need to do it slightly differently. You just need to create something that people will want. The other point to make about ideas is I've been independent since 1998. So I've been busy gathering all my own business myself and coming up with various ideas. And I think it's often the case that people who've got no exposure to being an entrepreneur or solopreneur think it's about some very clever idea. Ideas are very important, but actually ideas are quite easy. What really matters is what I call idea times execution times familiarity. By which I mean how well the idea is executed is important. You and I could decide, hey, let's go and set up a coffee shop, but we probably wouldn't do very well. We may not be very familiar with that area. We may not execute it very well. One of the points about the empowerment is that it comes back to passion. What are you really interested in? What do you spend your time doing when you don't have anything else to do? Is it knitting? Is it maglev trains? Is it insurance? Is it making rope furniture in the wood? Whatever is your thing is your thing. When you are being yourself, your true self most, that's when other people are going to want some of it. If you're just trying to simulate being a soldier in the Clone Wars, you're not really going to be yourself, you're not really going to be adding the value. You may think you have no passion, but that's just back to the first point about being stressed. Or you just can't see it as it's too implicit in everything you do, in which case you need to work with someone who'll be able to see your wood from your trees. The fifth point to make is to turn this thinking around from what you can do to what the world needs. Rather like the classic Venn diagram from school, commercial success is found at the intersection of your passion, your uniqueness, your interests, and what the world wants to buy. What the world wants to buy is always rather harder than it sounds in business school textbooks. I always think back to Henry Ford's comment that if he'd asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. I think one useful angle here is that people and companies are always telling us what they need, especially when they don't realise it. What do people like doing? They like complaining about their troubles. Well, there you have it. If you can solve personal or corporate problems, then the sales process is as good as done, as you know they need it. I would like to quote from Dream Design Surf by Marcello Bravo. He's founded or co-founded 4 companies since he immigrated to the UK 12 years ago. He says, at a minimum, at the heart of the dream there is a problem that needs to be solved. Something is not quite right. There is an unmet consumer need, a gap in the market, a mousetrap that is not catching any mice, a service that continually disappoints. The bigger and darker the problem, the more compelling the opportunity. In terms of the pain angle, I believe powerful entrepreneurial dreams come from distress. I actually believe that the most powerful entrepreneurial dreams come from personal distress. You are not happy with yourself and your personal situation. You are just not happy, dissatisfied, perhaps feeling unrecognised, perhaps some of all of that, and on top of that too, you're being made redundant. And a very nice quote which wraps up the whole talk, coming back to this original theme in part 1 of the intersection of business and individuals these days. And this also sums up part 3 in terms of being inspirational. He says, we all have our own stories, our ups and downs and moments of difficulty. I've had my tough times. It has been through entrepreneurship that I've moved from a personal state of dissatisfaction and anxiety to a state of realization and empowerment. Entrepreneurship has been my therapy. And so this brings the talk to an end. To wrap up, the world has changed. There are uniquely new threats and opportunities out there. You're not on your own looking for the way forwards, and there are people to help you. To finish, I'd like to go back to my favourite cartoon by Dan Fletcher. I hope these talks have been educational, informative and provocative. I'm less interested in whether every precise comment I've made has been precisely correct. That itself, of course, is an abstraction. I'm much more interested in whether I've managed to open the door slightly for you, to see more possibilities for your future, to see more interest and potentially change your life.